Year 12's following the training principles presentation, we're going to look at now training methods, which follows your essentials guide. So within this, we're going to look at how we can actually apply the principles to these training methods, how to best, again, stimulate the athlete for any sort of chronic adaptations. So 5 main training principles or training methods. So we have our interval training, we have our continuous training, our fartlek training, our circuit training, and our weight or resistance training, which we can also throw in there plyometric training. So, starting off with interval training. So we're looking at something that involves structured periods of work followed by structured periods of rest. So if we're looking at, for example, the work interval may be a distance to run, say 60 meters, or a time to run, say 10 seconds, followed by a structured period of rest. So the advantage of this is particularly suitable for team players, as it consists of short bursts followed by slow walking or stopping, develop speed. So if we're looking here, interval training, we can taper it to our energy systems. So for example, with our ATP-PC energy system here, we can go between 5 and 10 seconds, 9 to 100% of our maximum heart rate, 3 to 5 the interval time. So say for example, we had 5 seconds of effort followed by a rest of 30 seconds, and we did 5 repetitions of that. That would be interval. So structured work to rest ratio, and we can measure it through this work to rest ratio here. Then we can do it for our lactate systems and our aerobic system, obviously by altering the interval time, the intensity, the rest period. So here's a question to consider. How can I apply the principle of overload to the interval session? So have a think about that for a minute. Okay, so if we're looking at our overload, what we're doing is we're increasing a part of the training session throughout the program. So whether it's our frequency, whether it's our intensity, whether it's the time that we have to work it in, the rest time, the amount of repetitions, the type of activity we're doing. So here, we could look at the interval here. If we wanted to keep it ATP-PC, we could keep it at 5 seconds. And what we might do is look at increasing that to 10 repetitions. Why would I say that? If we're doing ATP-PC, it's because we need our 30 seconds break and we don't want to be working for any longer than 5 seconds. We might then increase our sets to say 4, and our frequency, we might say 4. So there I've applied the principle of overload. If I want to look at a lactic acid type, I might increase that to 15 secs. All right, 95% maximum heart rate, working pretty well. Then I might reduce the rest period to 20 secs. Again, increasing the repetitions, sets, frequency per week, I might leave the same. So here I've applied overload. Now, if I've structured a training program, I might do that over the 6-week period. All right, so moving on to continuous training. Definition. So, as it sounds, continuous training, we're looking at an activity where the athlete does not actually stop working. So again, if we're looking at a high intensity activity, we wouldn't be able to do high intensity continuous training because there would be a period of time where you'd have to lower that intensity. So we're looking at a sub-maximal intensity type training. So it could start with a brisk walk and move to jog. It could be over a certain distance or a certain time. It could be running, it could be swimming, it could be walking, it could be bike riding. The advantages of this, you can work in your own or in a group. It's suitable for health and fitness. A good way to get started to be involved in some sort of training. It improves aerobic fitness. So those are advantages. So here, let's look at this. So types of continuous training. So see here, all below our maximum heart rate. Okay, you can see this one. Obviously, the duration has to be limited because of the high intensity nature. But with all these ones here, we're looking at we can have that extended period of time, and we can look at how we would use it. So whether we want to look at really pushing into that ultra distance, or we want to work on cardiovascular endurance for that shorter long distance running. So the question here is describe the relationship between effort and duration on the examples on the table. So the higher the intensity, the shorter duration. We know that because of fatigue. So how could we possibly overload the continuous session? Again, increasing things like duration. All right. If we went from this early in our training program, we could move it up to an increased intensity. All right. With that added duration factor. But we got to be aware that as we increase this, this sometimes has to decrease. When we're looking at here, we could look at the frequency. If we're doing that twice a week, we move it up to 3 times a week. So that's how we apply overload to that type of training session. Fartlek, definition, it means speed play. So fartlek is looking at a combination of fast and slow activities. So it can be done in a variety of terrain. It can be like cross-country type work, sand dunes, parklands, forests. It can include hill work, skipping. What we do is we use it to increase the muscle's tolerance to lactic acid, and it really develops that muscular endurance. Okay, so here we've got some different types of fartlek training. You can pause to read this if you would like. Now, how do we overload a fartlek session? You can see here we've got 14 different stages, each which have seconds of duration and each which have different type of effort. So what we might do to apply the overload is we might take out the walking sections and replace them with jogging. So we're increasing the intensity. We might increase the time. So we increase the time. We might increase the frequency from 2 times a week up to 4 times a week later in the program. So again, that's how we apply the principle of overload. Circuit training. So a little bit like interval training, where we have structured work to rest periods. However, we're looking at something where we have stations and it might have specific type of activities. So we can do a circuit of interval running. We could do a circuit of long distance running. We could do a circuit of weight training. We could do a circuit of plyometric training. So it's really up to the individual, but circuit is another way of structuring. So advantages are, it includes strength, endurance, power, flexibility and speed. And again, it's a good way to introduce people of all levels to fitness, all levels of fitness to training, and we can look at both anaerobic and aerobic activities like I mentioned before. Really, we can tailor it to anyone's need. Circuit training, we can use a variety of stations and we can target any fitness component. So here we can see basic circuit training where we might start step ups and we might say 60 seconds each with 45 rest. So a rest allows us to move from point to point. So we might 60 seconds step ups, 60 seconds sit ups, 60 seconds press ups, 60 seconds squats, pull ups, ski jumps, etc. All right. So we can see how that we can target anything we want there. This looks at body resistance, for example. Weight training. It's all resistance training. So it's a form of training that we can use resistance to work specific muscle groups. So repetition, that's a word used to describe how many times the weight is lifted, and sets is how many times the group of repetitions are performed. So we might do bench press of 10 repetitions over 3 sets. So the advantages are scientifically proven to develop strength, power and muscular endurance if we can provide we can apply the principle of overload throughout the program. So here we can see strength. Strength, power, and endurance. So the more we want to focus on strength, the less repetitions we do. All right, we do it at slow speed and we rest for longer. If we want power, we do more repetitions, less sets, and then we do it fast, so more high intensity. And then the more endurance focus we want, again, the more repetitions, the less weight. So you can see they're very heavy, moderate, light, and then we increase our repetitions as we get down to endurance. We have three types. We're isometric, so they are static holds. We have isotonic, where we're shortening and lengthening, so that's the most common used. And we have isokinetic, which is used for rehabilitation. So isotonic weight training exercise are the ones most commonly used we do in gyms. All right, so these increase muscular strength and power, endurance. They help with fitness components like speed, because sprinters need to be able to work at high intensities, develop muscle bulk, and we use weight training to rehabilitate after any illness or injury. Plyometrics is another sort of resistance training, and what we do is it's a lot of bounding and skipping, and what we do plyometrics is to develop power, particularly in the legs. So sports like volleyball, where there's lots of jumping, basketball, we do plyometric type exercises to be able to boost our jumping capabilities. Okay. So one thing that you guys can do is think about and maybe stop and pause and look at the fitness component that might be involved in each of these and a gym activity that you can think of. All right. Now, this was covered before the training principles section, but just to talk about it with our training programs. So what we do is we try and peak our athletes to make sure they're performing at their best when it's the most important. So the aim of a carefully planned training program is to ensure the athlete will peak at the top of their performance in the important type of competition. So at the moment, NBA are getting into the conference finals and the NBA finals. Their training program would make sure that they are in the perfect position to perform at their most elite at this point of the year. Same if you're looking at a cyclist competing in the Tour de France, they would want to be peaking going into the Tour de France. Periodization. So we're looking at 3 phases of training. So we have a pre-season phase, which is general preparation, building that aerobic base, and you might have specific training, specific preparation with like speed or power or that sort of key fitness component that's involved in your particular sport. Then you have your competitive phase, which is looking at pre-competitive skills, tactics, fitness maintenance, and your competitive training, which is tapered during the week, and you might have tactical stuff involved in that. And then you have an off-season phase, which is looking at mental, physical relaxation and looking at recovery and making sure you're continuing to do light aerobic and strength conditioning work. So now what you need to do is go to your essentials guide. Please read through the notes there and answer the guided questions from page 107 to 118. Make sure this is ready for the next lesson. Good luck.